The subcommittee will come to order. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to be here today for our first subcommittee markup since the 115th Congress. Today we're going to mark up 10 bills, 4 of which we'll be asking for unanimous consent to be considered in a block, and all of which were discussed at the subcommittee's legislative hearing on March 30th. I'm supportive of today's bill's agenda as they are bipartisan and that, frankly, they just make sense. The subcommittee will support these bills as well as we move forward in the process. In accordance with committee rules, the subcommittee has contacted the Congressional Budget Office seeking informal preliminary cost estimates for each of the bills being considered this afternoon. Many of these preliminary scores are only a range of potential costs because the subcommittee has still not received official cost estimates on the bills from the VA or the CBO. None of the bills today include the offsets which will be necessary to move the bills forward. However, as we discussed, these bills will move forward to the full committee markup and then to the floor. We will add offsets to ensure that we are, if they are, or as they, ensure that they are in accordance with the House rules and we consider the American taxpayer. As is our normal practice, we'll need to get the official scores and identify necessary offsets before these bills are considered on the floor. I look forward to working with the ranking member and other members of the subcommittee to find offsets that have the least impact on our veterans. I want to also say that there are multiple opportunities to improve and make necessary changes to these bills. The ranking member and I will continue to work with our colleagues on the committee and any stakeholders that have feedback on these bills as we continue to work through the legislative process. I want to note that one of the bills that we will consider today is affected by a Toxic Exposure Fund issue that was created last Congress with the passage of the PAC Act. While we are supportive of the legislation, issues made it much harder for us to pass important legislation for our veterans. And unfortunately, this will not be the last bill affected by the issues on the subcommittee. We must continue to seek a resolution for this problem on a bipartisan basis to ensure that we can fund important programs for our veterans. I now recognize the distinguished ranking member for any opening remarks he may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll be very brief as we'll talk about the content of these bills as we're bringing them up. But this is how this place is supposed to work. I appreciate the Chairman for continuing the tradition that I've had here over the last 2 terms where we work together to get the best legislation put forward and to get that passed out of the subcommittee, one of the most productive subcommittees in the House of Representatives, and I know it'll continue to be under your leadership. I'll yield back.
Thank you. I now call up H.R. 645. The clerk shall read the report, or report the bill, sorry.
H.R. 645, to amend Title 38 United States Code to permanently authorize the use of certain funds to improve flexibility in the provision of assistance to homeless veterans.
The text was circulated in advance pursuant to the committee rules. Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the bill will now be open for amendment at any point. I now recognize Mr. Levin for the purpose of offering an amendment.
I have an amendment in the nature of a substitute at the desk.
The clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 645. Strike all after the enacting clause and
I
insert.
ask unanimous consent that further reading the amendment in the nature of the substitute be dispensed with and that it be considered base text for the purpose of the markup. Hear no objection, so ordered. Mr. Levin is now recognized for 5 minutes to speak in support of his amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 645.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm proud to offer this amendment in the nature of a substitute to my colleague, Congresswoman Cherfilus McCormick's H.R. 645, the Healthy Foundation for Homeless Veterans Act, the Johnny Isaacson and David P. Rowe Healthcare and Benefits Improvement Act of 2020, which I sponsored, authorized VA to spend funds on basic needs for homeless veterans, such as food, transportation, shelter, communication equipment, and clothing during the covered public health emergency caused by COVID-19. Prior to Isaacson Rowe, VA had no authority to use funds in this manner. Community organizations and nonprofits were relied on to fill these gaps for essentials for homeless veterans in need. We routinely hear how difficult it is for organizations who want to help homeless veterans to do so with limited resources, and we've heard firsthand how game-changing this authority is for providers. With the end of the public health emergency now approaching, it is imperative that this committee act to extend this authorization. The ANS we're considering now will allow VA to provide homeless veterans with these basic needs to ensure their survival, safety, and health for 2 more years. This bill is a long-needed change in policy that will allow VA to expend funds for essentials, the foundational elements of a person's well-being. This bill is particularly important for veterans residing in rural areas where it's often harder to reach services and resources. We cannot reasonably expect a veteran experiencing homelessness to transition into permanent housing and a stable livelihood without access to basics like food, clothing, and transportation. The communication devices and data plans VA can purchase through this authority are also a critical lifeline to health care and resources that are otherwise impossible for homeless veterans to access. To date, VA has used nearly $9 million to pay for essentials for over 39,000 veterans through this authority. The authority has also been used to pay for over 416,000 rides for nearly 42,000 homeless veterans to get them to and from medical appointments and job interviews. The value here is more than just numbers. At our legislative hearing last month, we heard about the impact of this flexibility in testimony from VA's staff who are using these funds to care for homeless veterans. Extending the authorization of these flexibilities for VA will help homeless veterans secure the wraparound resources they need to get and keep them stably housed. I want to be very clear. Without these authorities, we'll never be able to fully end and prevent homelessness for every veteran experiencing or at risk of it. This bill is supported by the Department of Veterans Affairs, Disabled American Veterans, National Alliance to End Homelessness, National Coalition for Homeless Veterans, Mazon, Bento, Veterans of Foreign Wars, Jewish War Veterans of the USA, Minority Veterans of America, Community Solutions, the American Legion, and Code Platoon. I urge my colleagues to support my amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 645, and I yield back.
I thank the gentleman for his amendment in the nature of a substitute, and it has my full support. Do any other members wish to comment on the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 645? No other amendments were filed. Are there any further amendments? Hearing none, the question now occurs on Mr. Levin's amendment to the nature of a substitute to H.R. 645. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those in favor say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment in the nature of a substitute is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid at the table. I now recognize Mr. Levin for a motion.
I move that we report H.R. 645 as amended favorably to the full committee.
There is a motion to favorably forward H.R. 645 as amended. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and H.R. 645 as amended is favorably forwarded to the full committee. I now call up H.R. 728. The clerk shall report the bill.
H.R. 728, to direct the Assistant Secretary of Labor for Veterans Employment and Training to carry out a pilot
The bill was
program.
circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules. Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is now open for amendment at any point. Does any member wish to be recognized to speak on this bill? Hearing none, I recognize myself for the purpose of offering an amendment. The clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 728, page 1 after line 2.
I ask unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment be dispensed with. Hearing no objection, so ordered. I recognize myself for 5 minutes to speak in support of the amendment to H.R. 728. This amendment simply makes a technical correction to change the operative years of the bill from fiscal year 2023 through 2027 to fiscal year 2024 through 2028. I yield back. Do any members wish to comment on the amendment to H.R. 728? Hearing none, the question occurs on the amendment of H.R. 728. All in favor will say aye.
Aye.
All opposed will say nay. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. No other amendments were filed. Are there any further amendments to the bill? Hearing none, the question now occurs on Bill H.R. 728 as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The bill is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. I now recognize Mr. Levin for a motion.
I move that we report H.R. 728 favorably to the full committee.
There is a motion to favorably forward H.R. 728 as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and H.R. 728 as amended is favorably forwarded to the full committee. I now call up H.R. 1669. The clerk shall report the bill.
H.R. 1669, to amend Title 38 United States Code to make permanent the high technology
Bill
pilot.
was circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules. Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is now open to amendment at any point. I now recognize the distinguished gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. McGarvey, for the purpose of offering an amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment in the nature of a substitute at the desk.
The clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 16669. Strike all after the
I
enacting.
ask unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment in the nature of a substitute be dispensed with and that it be considered base text for the purpose of the amendment. Without objection, so ordered. Mr. McGarvey is now recognized for 5 minutes to speak in support of his amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1669.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I offer the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1669, the Vet Tech Authorization Act of 2023. The Vet Tech program was created in the 2017 Forever GI Bill, which created a 5-year program to employ veterans in high-tech fields of employment. During those 5 years, we have seen over 1,500 students go through the program with an 85% completion rate, and over 60% find meaningful employment with an average salary of over $65,000 a year. Those are some great numbers. We want to ensure that all people, and especially our veterans, have strong, good-paying jobs and benefits. Unfortunately, this program is set to end soon, at a time when it remains extremely popular with our veterans. Veterans and education groups have contacted the committee and the VA urging an extension. Well, I know we all want to do everything we can to help our veterans and would consider a permanent extension similar to the base text of H.R. 1669. Time is short, funding is short, and permanent extension is unlikely to pass the United States Senate. That's why, in consultation with the chairman, his staff, and committee staff, I offer the amendment in the nature of a substitute to extend Vet Tech 5 more years and add additional income reporting. In the future, when this committee moves to make Vet Tech permanent, which I believe we will, the data this ANS provides will be critical in ensuring a permanent Vet Tech program provides veterans with truly meaningful, well-paying employment. I want to thank the chairman for including H.R. 1669, and I urge my colleagues to support the ANS. I yield back the balance of my time.
I thank the gentleman for the amendment, and I support it. Do any other members wish to comment on the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1669? No other amendments were filed. Are there any further amendments to the amendment in the nature of a substitute? Hearing none and only partially understanding what I just said, that's a joke, sorry. That was for you, Eli. The question now occurs on the McGarvey amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1669. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment in the nature of a substitute is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. I now recognize Mr. Levin for a motion.
I move that we report H.R. 1669 favorably to the full committee.
There is a motion to favorably forward H.R. 1669 as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and H.R. 1669 as amended is favorably forwarded to the full committee. I now call up H.R. 1767. The clerk shall read the report.
H.R. 1767, to amend Title 38 United States Code to provide that educational assistance.
The bill was
paid-
circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules. Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is open for amendment at any point. I now recognize Ms. Ramirez for the purpose of offering an amendment.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment in the nature of a substitute at the desk.
The clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1767. Strike all after the enacting clause and insert
I
the
ask
following.
unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment in the nature of a substitute be dispensed with and that it be considered base text for the purpose of markup. Without objection, so ordered. Ms. Ramirez is now recognized for 5 minutes to speak in support of the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1767.
Thank you, Chairman. I am proud to offer this amendment in the nature of a substitute to my bill, H.R. 1767, the Student Veteran Benefit Restoration Act. The Student Veteran Benefit Restoration Act reflects years of advocacy led by the student veteran community who has been unfairly impacted by a long-standing inequity in the law. That inequity currently prevents veterans and their beneficiaries from restoring education and training benefits after a predatory for-profit school has defrauded them. Our veterans have rightfully earned their GI Bill benefits, and they should rightfully be restored when bad actors have targeted our vets to make a profit off of them. For years, predatory for-profit schools have been targeting veterans to enroll in their schools using promises of quality education that often doesn't live up to the marketing. If a school commits an act of fraud, there is currently no across-the-board mechanism in place for student veterans to have their GI Bill benefits restored. Student veterans are particularly targeted because their GI Bill benefits, which are administered out of the VA, represent potential revenue that doesn't count against a school's limit on receiving revenue from the Department of Education. For non-veteran students who take out federal student loans, they can access what's known as borrower defense from the Department of Education if their school has defrauded them. Unfortunately, that does not apply for veterans who use their GI Bill educational benefits. But we can change that, which is exactly what my bill, the Student Veterans Benefit Restoration Act, will do. The amendment offered now expands triggering of benefit restoration to also include actions and determinations from the Department of Justice, as well as state governments, in addition to ED, the FTC, and the VA. The bill protects taxpayers by authorizing the VA to recoup GI Bill benefits from schools engaged in predatory practices. And I recognize how critical bipartisanship and compromise is as I work with my Republican colleagues to advance legislation that protects and creates parity for our veterans. We have come together to include changes that are truly expansive. While not all changes in today's ANS are changes I'd have included on my own, we're ultimately moving the needle in the right direction for our veterans and paving the way for progress. I appreciate the input of my Republican colleagues who have offered, and I hope to see every member in this committee vote in support of it. The bill today importantly reflects community-based insights from the Veterans for Education Success and the Student Veterans of America. Their dedication to our student veterans simply cannot be understated, and I'm tremendously appreciative of their partnership throughout this legislative process. Last week, I hosted my first town hall in Bartlett, Illinois, where I met Sergeant Jack Kenyon, who had just celebrated his 100th birthday. We had a conversation on the side room about how Congress could work across the aisle and get things done for veterans. I am grateful we have the chance to do so right here, right now, and I'm especially grateful to represent incredible constituents like Sergeant Kenyon, who have given so much to his community and our nation. We know education is a pillar of democracy and a human right, and it empowers us to understand ourselves better, each other, and our shared world. It represents access to a better life. It is essential that Congress protects student veterans from predatory for-profit institutions by restoring their GI Bill benefits if they are lost because they've been defrauded. I want to thank Ranking Member Mike Levin, and I want to thank Chairman Van Orden for your commitment to veterans in our subcommittee. I welcome my colleagues to support the passage of my amendment in the nature of a substitute and advance H.R. 1767 to the full committee. Thank you, Chairman, and I yield back.
I thank the gentleman for the amendment in the nature of a substitute, and it has my support. Do any other members wish to comment on the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1767?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I'm a co-sponsor of Rep. Ramirez's legislation, and through this committee's process, we've made this bill better. The Ramirez ANS improves the bill in many ways, perhaps most importantly by covering all students retroactively and prospectively. I thank my colleague for offering the amendment. I urge my colleagues to support it. I yield back the balance of my time.
That's good. The clerk shall report the amendment. Oh, excuse me. Does any member wish to offer an amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute?
I rise to offer an amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute.
The clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1767.
I ask unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment be dispensed with and that the gentle lady is recognized for 5 minutes to explain her amendment. Ms. Ramirez?
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the amendment I submitted yesterday had an error. However, the version that's before you on your desk corrects that error. And I wish to offer the clarifying amendment to the amendment in nature of a substitute to H.R. 1767. The ANS to the Student Veteran Benefit Restoration Act before us today represents a critical step to protecting student veterans from predatory for-profit schools, and it encompasses feedback from my Republican colleagues on the committee. As I mentioned just a few moments ago, anytime we're negotiating on policy, there's always opportunities for compromise. One such change includes language that would bar student veterans from having their GI Bill benefits restored if they are found to participate in fraud. The amendment I put forth now to the ANS offers a more clear definition for fraud to ensure we are specific about instances in which this would be relevant, so that it doesn't get weaponized as a result of being overly broad. Specifically, the amendment would ensure that only individuals who knowingly committed fraud would be held accountable and would be unable to receive restoration of their GI Bill benefits. This amendment makes the important distinction between those willfully and intentionally engaged in high-level acts of fraud and those who were vulnerable targets of bad actors. As we move forward with this bill, we must address technical language that inadvertently creates barriers for our veterans. Veterans who come from low-income backgrounds or who may be first-generation students comprise a significant percentage of student veterans. Even with GI Bill benefits, they often still need additional funds to afford basic necessities like groceries. If a student veteran is told they can make an extra buck or two if they help out a for-profit college recruiting event for a few hours, that student veteran isn't a criminal mastermind scheming to defraud the peers and shouldn't be regarded as such. This is why we must not lose focus and hold the actual bad actors who intentionally mislead and defraud student veterans. Thank you, Chairman, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Do any other members wish to comment on the amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1767? Hearing none, the question now occurs on the amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1767. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. No other amendments were filed. Are there any further amendments to the amendment in the nature of a substitute? Hearing none, the question now occurs on the Ramirez amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1767. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment in the nature of a substitute is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. I now recognize Mr. Levin for a motion.
I move that we report H.R. 1767 as amended favorably to the full committee.
There's a motion to favorably forward H.R. 1767 as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and H.R. 1767 as amended is favorably forwarded to the full committee. I now call up H.R. 1798. The clerk shall report.
H.R. 1798, to amend Title 38 United States Code to render an individual who
The
transfers...
bill was circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules. Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is open for amendment at any point. I recognize myself to offer an amendment. The clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1798, strike all
I
after
ask
the...
unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment in the nature of a substitute be dispensed with. Without objection, so ordered. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes to speak in support of the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1798. My amendment would make a technical change to the bill to ensure that schools are pursuing debt collection from the service member and not the spouse. Do any other members wish to comment on the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1798? No other amendments were filed. Does any member wish to offer an amendment? Hearing none, the question now occurs on the Van Orden amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1798. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment in the nature of a substitute is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. I now recognize Mr. Levin for a motion.
I move that we report H.R. 1798 favorably to the full committee.
There is a motion to favorably forward H.R. 1798 as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and H.R. 1798 as amended is favorably forwarded to the full committee. I now call up H.R. 1799. The clerk shall report.
H.R. 1799, to amend Title 38 United States Code to expand eligibility for a
The bill was
certain...
circulated in advance pursuant to the committee rules. Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is now open to amend at any point. I recognize myself for the purpose of offering an amendment. The clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1799, strike all
I
after the...
ask unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment in the nature of a substitute be dispensed with. Without objection, so ordered. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes to speak in support of my amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1799. My amendment in the nature of a substitute has two technical changes that would improve this legislation. Under the A&S, the bill would increase who is eligible for the Department of Labor's outreach to all individuals who have or will in the future participate in the Transition Assistance Program. This will allow certain military spouses, certain members of the National Guard and Reserve, and other uniformed services who are eligible for TAP to also qualify. This amendment in the nature of a substitute would also expand eligibility for the Department of Labor's programs to 3 years after an individual's separation from the service. With that, I yield back. Do any members wish to comment on the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1799? No other amendments were filed. Does anyone seek to offer an amendment? Hearing none, the question now occurs to my amendment in the nature of a substitute for H.R. 1799. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment in the nature of a substitute is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. I now recognize Mr. Levin for a motion.
I move that we report H.R. 1799 favorably to the full committee.
There is a motion to favorably forward H.R. 1799 as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and H.R. 1799 as amended is favorably forwarded to the full committee. I now ask unanimous consent to consider the following bills en bloc: H.R. 746, H.R. 1169, H.R. 1635, H.R. 1786. Hearing no objection, so ordered. The clerk shall report the bills.
H.R. 746, to amend Title 38 United States Code to expand certain rehabilitation programs for certain veterans with service-connected disabilities.
The bills were circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules. I ask the reading of the bills be dispensed with, the bills be open to amendment at any point. Without objection, so ordered. Does any member wish to speak on any of the remaining bills on the agenda?
I'll speak on the en bloc package, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
Thank you for advancing these 4 bills, Mr. Chairman, to the full committee. Included in this en bloc package are 3 bills I want to highlight. First, H.R. 1169, the VA E-Notification Enhancement Act, which I introduced with Representative Arrington, who once chaired this subcommittee. The VA E-Notification Act will ensure veterans can receive notifications for education benefits electronically, making the process easier, quicker, and more efficient for veterans. Second, H.R. 1635, the Filipino Education Fairness Act from Representative Kiggins and myself, finally fixes an outdated limitation on GI Bill payments for education programs in the Philippines. We must deliver fairness for student veterans who wish to pursue their education in the Philippines. And finally, my legislation, H.R. 1786, the GROW Act. The GROW Act will make it easier for veterans to choose to work in federal service while protecting our nation's natural treasures. I urge support for the en bloc package, and I yield back.
No amendments were filed for these bills. Does any member wish to offer an amendment? Hearing none, the question now occurs on passage of the bills included in block. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. I now recognize Mr. Levin for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that H.R. 746, H.R. 1169, H.R. 1635, and H.R. 1786 be reported favorably to the full committee.
There is a motion to favorably forward the bills included in the en bloc. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the bills are favorably forwarded to the full committee. I ask unanimous consent that the committee staff be authorized to make technical, clerical, and conforming changes to the bills favorably forward today. Hearing no objection, so ordered. I really want to thank you guys for attending today. I appreciate it greatly, and to the subcommittee is now adjourned.